We're gonna give everybody a few minutes to hop in here, Having a good day so far, Jason?
Busy, man. That's it typically is.
Yes, sir. Lots going on. Yeah, for all you clients out there that have already joined, thanks for joining us. We're gonna give it another minute or two to allow some other folks to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Probably get my screen share going here. Okay. Another minute or two, and then we'll get started. Still drinking coffee too. All right, one more minute. We'll get rolling here. All right. We'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm sure some other participants will be trickling in as we go, but we do have a lot of material that we want to cover with you today. My name is Rick Trujillo. I'm on the cloud team here at MicroAge. My partner in crime is Mr. Jason Lane, and we're always getting in all sorts of trouble as it relates to Microsoft. But we're here to talk to you about the differences between enterprise agreements and CSP. This is kind of this topic has gained a lot of interest. It's always had some interest, but it's gained a lot of interest. And a lot of it has to do with some of the program changes and some other recent announcements by Microsoft that are giving a lot of EA customers out there a moment of pause and having them ask themselves the question: Am I still doing the right thing as it relates to licensing? Are there some other business decisions out there I can make around licensing? We're going to try and cover as much of that information today. And really, we want to show you the differences between the two programs, show you where we have seen some trending occur as it relates to this, and then leave it open for any action items. And if you'd like to follow up with us and have some discussions around, what you want to do around your enterprise agreement moving forward, we're happy to talk with you about that. There are also some customers, some clients that have joined today that are thinking about going to an enterprise agreement. Maybe they haven't made the decision yet and they're just looking for a little more information. Regardless, welcome. We're glad that you're all here. We're going to go ahead and get started. So as far as the agenda is concerned, don't let it overwhelm you. We're going to set the stage a little bit. We're going to talk about a few of the things that have occurred, let's call it the past 6 to 8 months. I call it the crime scene, really. Like, here's where we are today. As far as recent announcements from Microsoft are concerned, we'll go over some questions that you might want to ask yourself, okay, as it relates to your EA or some licensing decisions that you're going to make. Then we'll compare and contrast EA versus CSP. We'll talk about how you can diversify some of these programs. You don't have to land on just one, right? There, you've got options, right? And some of them are cost effective, more manageable, more low risk, and you might want to, leverage it in that fashion. Some other items to consider and some action items. And Jason's here to keep me honest on a lot of this stuff, so I'm sure he'll interject, and I'll try to make this as conversational with him as possible. So we'll start with the open license program. This is something that's been running, that ran for decades, right? This was the kind of what the volume license program at Microsoft was built upon many, many years ago. And this ended back in December of 2021. It was a transactional license program, and all those licenses were managed in the volume license service center. And this allowed for you to purchase perpetual licenses with SA. Okay. Now that was recently replaced under the CSP program. It's called Perpetual CSP. And these are licenses that can be purchased perpetually or via subscription. And it is now viewed in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center as opposed to the VLSC. So you can already sense that things are starting to veer towards the Admin Center and kind of, encouraging customers to live in that place as far as, license management is concerned. Now, what's still available is the Open Value Agreement, and there's also the MPSA agreement. We're not going to talk too much about the MPSA agreement today. It doesn't really have a lot of notoriety, formally called the Select Agreement. But if you do have questions about that, or if you are on an MPSA agreement and would like to talk about how it weighs against the CSP, we can talk one-on-one about that. Today we're here to talk more specifically about the Enterprise Agreement. Now, the new commerce experience, this is the thing that came out this year, and it impacted CSP, right? The CSP program, as you might know of, right? This is a partner program. It was a very flexible license management program that was introduced a number of years back, and this allowed you to provision and manage cloud services, right? Seat-based licensing, Azure subscriptions, things like that. It was a very lightly enforced annual subscription. You're provisioning your licenses for a year, but it was extremely flexible. There was you could cancel anytime. You could pretty much do anything you wanted around this. It was partner managed, billed, and supported. So everything sort of ran through the partner, right? We would give you a place to go provision your licenses. We would bill you for your licenses. Anytime you had a tier 1 technical support issue, we would support you for those licenses. This is now called Legacy CSP. And what was recently introduced is the new commerce experience. And the main differentiators there, right, have to do with cost and how you commit to provisioning those licenses and flexibility, right? So you do lose some ability, right? Partner changes during the course of the agreement. Reductions and downgrades are no longer available. Cancellations after 7 days are no longer available. So once you provision the license, you have a very limited amount of time before you can make those changes. And the cost depends on how you commit, right? You can pay month to month, but there's a premium associated with that. It's about 20%. Or you can enter into an annual agreement and avoid that 20% premium. Still partner managed, right? So it still runs through a CSP provider, still billed and supported by the CSP provider. It's still part of the CSP program, right? Cloud Solutions Provider program hasn't gone away. It's the concept of new commerce experience that's been introduced into that. And just know that all Microsoft customers that are on CSP have to move to this new commerce experience, concept by the end of February 2023. Jason, is there anything you want to add to this before I continue on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you start looking at the comparisons, right, the EA versus CSP, and it might look like it's more rigid, when you look at going to NC. However, once you look at the comparisons of what you can do with the new commerce experience, right, you have that 12-month agreement, but you're still able to upgrade and add licenses during that terms. So one thing we like to promote is before you go into NC is that you reconcile your licenses so that you have the minimum level of commitment. And then as you do add licenses throughout the term, it raises that commitment. But then upon renewal, then you can reevaluate and then reconcile licenses before going into that next term as well. And what we really focus on here at MicroAge is that you are getting all the features and benefits of what you're currently getting when it comes to Office 365 licenses. And then also the enablement of when it comes comes to now with the Microsoft 365 admin portal, if you are utilizing those perpetual licenses, there's now different ways of downloading and activating the products directly from the partner center rather than utilizing the VLSC. So it's the KMS and MAC key activation that's being more transitioned over to the admin portal when it comes to different services and products that are available. But we're here to support you on any of those options and really provide you with all the information possible and how we can be there and be more integrated with you along the way on what you're looking to do in the future when it comes to Microsoft and that journey or roadmap experience of the enablement process.
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to deconstruct a lot of what Jason just said over the next several slides here. But I mean, that summarizes it. You can leave the webinar now if you like, because he just covered everything pretty
See you
much. No,
later.
just kidding. No, nice job, Jason. But we'll definitely break things down as we go. So let's talk about some of the rumors around enterprise agreement. Let's squash some of that so that we can sort of, get a clean slate and then go into this. Number one, right? There is a rumor going around that EAs are going away. That is false, not true, right? Enterprise agreements will be around for a long time to come. Now, the how EAs are sold, right? There's definitely some stuff that's going to be happening there, and we'll dive into that a little bit as we go. But EAs are not going away; they're here to stay. But definitely, as far as how they are structured, we'll dive into that a little bit. I've heard another one that the EA user threshold is 1,000 users. Currently, that is false. The minimum is 500 users, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But it is expected, right? It is expected, Microsoft, to change this to 1,000 users, right? So they're going to up the minimum threshold requirements to get into EA. This is the change that we're expecting to happen sometime next fiscal year. Again, we're expecting it to happen. Microsoft, they do tend to change their mind on certain things, but right now this is the information that we're expecting so far. Another rumor we're expecting is that, another rumor we've heard is that the EA user threshold is 2,400 users, and that is not true, but it kind of is, right? And here's what I mean, right? There are some partner-led requirements, and we're going to kind of open the kimono a little bit today and really reveal to you how partners are driven to position and sell some of these things. That way you have a little bit better of a behind-the-scenes perspective on how these things are sold. So there is a threshold out there of 2,400 users that was recently introduced. It doesn't have anything to do with your minimum requirements to get into the program. It does impact how partners are incentivized to sell these things, right? So we do want to touch on that briefly just to make sure that you understand, how the sales process is going to work. That way you can just make the best business decision, right? Another rumor is that EAs are always cheaper than CSP. That is not always the case. There are some certain levels of enterprise agreements that are as cost effective as CSP, especially with some of these other changes that are upcoming next fiscal. Also, if you focus on some of the support costs associated with having an enterprise agreement, it can be more cost effective to move to a CSP agreement instead, because a lot of that support is included in the program and it's partner driven, right? So not always the case. Next one would be partners make more money selling you an EA. Well, that depends, right? It depends on the level of the EA that they're selling you. A long time ago when enterprise agreements were introduced, it was the crown jewel of license programs, and partners loved selling it because they got tons of fees and tons of money, and it was great. But there's definitely been a shift in that over the decades, right? And right now there are only certain types of clients where it makes more sense for a partner to drive an EA. And a lot of that has to do with some of the changes that Microsoft has introduced. They are definitely encouraging, right? A lot of these small to medium business clients that typically qualify for an EA to move into the CSP community. And there's a few reasons for that, and we'll get into that. Another rumor is that an EA has better support, and that's not always the case either, okay? EAs do offer support, and depending on the support program you enter into can impact things like SLA and things like that. But it depends on what you're looking for in a support partner more than anything else, because as when it comes to Microsoft, they are very limited in the level of relationship focus that they have with a lot of clients out there. And when you talk about CSPs and CSP partners, they sort of pride themselves on the relationship focus when it comes to support. So it really depends on what you're looking for there. Jason, do you have anything to add?
Oh man, I think that really sums up a lot of it. You know, when you look at the comparisons and how EAs are built, and a lot of times added with additional things where clients may not be getting full utilization of, or need to necessarily pay for that expense when it comes to incorporating EAs and that all encompassing support agreement.
Yeah. So when you look at Microsoft's intentions here, and this is really, I mean, we're on a lot of calls with Microsoft. We're we stay very, very close to this because it's our job to keep you informed. There are some things that Microsoft is intending on doing, right? They do want to drive the Microsoft EA relationships to our larger enterprise level clients. And that's really where that 2400 thing comes into play. That's kind of like the soft threshold for that. They're also making some changes to the EA requirements. Like I said, they're expected to increase the minimum threshold to get into an enterprise agreement to 1,000 users. So we're definitely getting a sense that Microsoft wants to focus the enterprise agreement to the larger customer and drive smaller and medium-sized business focus down into the CSP partner community. And a lot of that has to do with these changes to partner incentives, right? They're incentivizing partners a little bit differently now and encouraging partners out there to try and position and sell CSP to smaller customers and position and sell EAs to larger customers. Full transparency, that is definitely what we're detecting right now. Um, Another thought is drive other license programs through the CSP program. Like I said, they introduced the perpetual CSP program. They discontinued the open license program, which means they're pointing clients towards the CSP program. They're pointing clients towards management of licenses through the Office 365 Admin Center. So another thing that sort of gives you that detection that they want to increase the focus on CSP. Um, Making EA and Microsoft Direct only services available in CSP. There was a time where you couldn't get communications credits from a CSP partner. You could not get multi-geo licensing from a CSP partner. Let's put a pin in that one for a second. And then there were definitely limited on funding programs for the CSP partner community, right? You could easily have an EA and get a bunch of money towards projects and things like that. But now communications credits are available via Azure subscription. You don't have to get them out of the admin center, right? So now a CSP can position an Azure subscription with you, and then you can provision your communications credits for all your Teams voice products through Azure. It's consumed as a resource now. Multi-geo licensing is still to be determined, but if for those of you clients out there that need data center locations in other countries, whether it be for GDPR requirements or whatever the case may be, multi-geo licensing is something that was only available via an enterprise agreement. This is something that is soon to come to the CSP program as well. So for all of you clients out there that are global license management conscious, right? The CSP program is definitely going to be more accessible for you for that, and funding programs as well. Funding programs are becoming more and more available to the CSP partner community, where if we identify a project that you have with you and we want to get out there and ask Microsoft for some money to help you onboard some newer technology, whether it's Microsoft Endpoint Manager or whatever the case may be, those funding programs are available. This one's really interesting, and this is definitely something to think about. When you're out there talking to your partners, or when you're evaluating this thing, the topic of Microsoft 365 E5 should come up. This is something that is definitely being encouraged, amongst the sales community to get customers to E5, to get them to leverage and maximize the value out of E5. I'm not discounting it. It's a fantastic product. It comes with a ton of stuff, but partner community, especially on the EA side, there is a level of interest, right? They are incentivizing customers to get you more interested in driving you to the Microsoft 365 E5 product. Okay, so be mindful of that. They're going to ask you about your journey a little bit, because the end game is to get all of your licensed users to E5, which I play devil's advocate with that all the time. Jason's a security guy, so he likes the E5 license, but I'm always like, let's deconstruct the license and find out which use cases it actually supports. And let's license those users for E5 potentially. But let's find out if there's some more cost-effective plans or programs that you could leverage for the body of your users and perhaps save some money there. But Jason, maybe you have a rebuttal.
No, you bring up an excellent point, Rick. And, something that we discuss with clients all the times is mixing and matching, whether it's integrating business plans and enterprise plans just for that cost reduction. But you're right. I am a big fan of M365 E5. But what I've noticed is we have clients that sign up for E5 and don't always implement all the services around and aren't utilizing compliance manager purview assessments that are included with it, don't enable, a lot of the advanced e-discovery options that come with it. And a lot of it's the knowledge, right? Microsoft has about 8 different admin portals. Where do you go to do what? What can I do to enable this, or what can I do to enable that? And that's really where, we at MicroAge come into effect of having those support options available, whether it's implementing a project from start to finish that our services team has delivered for other organizations of various sizes, and as best practices, providing that higher level of support that we hear all the time, where customers on an EA is like, yeah, Microsoft got me into the M365 E5, I'm good to go. You can have the best security product out there. If nobody's monitoring the alerts, incidents, having auto remediation, really how good is the product from that point? So mostly in our cases is reevaluating it, kind of providing that higher level of support. And then what's the next area of focus? How can we get you there and make sure that you are fully protected moving forward in this new environment that we live in?
100%. Very well said. Folks, if you have any questions out there or comments, feel free to use the chat. We'll be monitoring as we go, and we'll address either at the end or as we go here. So let's talk about some questions that you folks can ask yourself out there, whether you're considering an enterprise agreement or already an enterprise agreement customer. First off, and this is the most important one, ask yourself how you want to be supported, right? When it comes to things like response times, uh, products, services, what's the level of familiarity? How deep of a relationship do you want with this partner? Microsoft, they do a lot of good things, right? They do have professional services programs where they can get engaged with you and help guide you on a lot of this stuff. The relationship focus probably isn't what you would want if that's something that you truly value. However, with the CSP, extremely important. Cost is another thing to consider as well. Like I said, an enterprise agreement typically has a support cost as an attach rate, and there's different levels of support that are offered to you, and we'll get into that in a little minute, in a little bit of time here. But really, it's important that you ask yourself that question: how do you want to be supported? And then, of course, who do you want to support you? Do you want it to be Microsoft? Do you want it to be a partner? Do you want it to be both? CSP does tend to offer the best of both worlds in that somebody like MicroAge is the first line of defense from a support perspective, but in rare cases, there's something that we can't handle for you. And then we have that bat phone, we have that point of escalation into Microsoft to get you, the response and the help that you need. So it's, sort of the best of both worlds there. Services, can the partner fulfill professional services? Can the partner fulfill managed services needs? I should have put question marks on there, but this is really important. Do you want to work with somebody that not only helps you manage and maintain your licenses, but at the same time, with that knowledge, can they help you stage and set up future projects from a professional services service or even managed services perspective? Partner is really important as well. Remember, these are long-term agreements now, especially with the introduction of new commerce experience on the CSP side. Your level of commitment to that partner is a little more long-term. It doesn't matter if it's CSP or EA, right? So asking yourself, am I happy, with the partner that I'm working with today? Are they thinking about me? And this is sort of twofold. Am I hearing from them, right? There are a lot of EA partners out there that will show up at true up time, but they don't really add the value throughout that 12-month period. Something to think about. The other thing to think about there is as far as professional services, and like I said, all these other things that they tend to offer? Are they proactive about getting you to that next generation product out there, and helping you determine if it's something that's going to be valuable to your business, right? Tomorrow's technologies, as an example. Are they helping me manage my licensing cost effectively? This is extremely important, and unfortunately something that we do notice goes unnoticed, right? Um, Especially on the EA side, and there are definitely some CSP partners out there that really don't take the time to regularly assess and evaluate how you're licensing, how you're licensed. Are you over provisioned? Are you making right size recommendations, for your users, things like that. And then as far as CSP is concerned, there is some flexibility there as far as the ability to work with multiple partners. If you're an existing EA customer, just to sort of help you set the stage for yourself before you go into evaluating whether it's another partner or moving out of the EA program, you got to know your renewal date. Got to know when that's upcoming. We do talk to a lot of EA customers and we say, hey, when's your renewal date? And they're like, I don't know. Well, that's an important piece of information. So we have a timeline to work with. Um, Knowing the level of your EA, is it A, is it B, is it C? A lot of customers don't know this, but it's entirely based on volume and the number of users that you enter into the agreement with. What am I paying for support is another very important question. What kind of support agreement do I have with my enterprise agreement? How much am I paying for it, right? And then another great question to ask is how many incidents am I actually reporting to Microsoft per year? In other words, is it worth the value of what I'm paying for that support? Or would I prefer to have something a little more customizable, right? How is my Office licensing provisioned? In other words, is it still Office Pro? Is it Pro Plus? Are you licensed for Microsoft 365 on your enterprise agreement? Like getting an idea of what's at your disposal there from a licensing perspective is really, really important. And then of course, what are my other license program options? And I think that's why you guys might be here today if you're an existing EA customer. Licensing and license optimization is something we focus on heavily. We want to make sure that the product fits the use case of the user, and we want to make sure that you're not over provisioned, right? You're only paying for what you're using. These are two very important things that we like to address in any license optimization discussion that we have. And finally, we're looking at milestones. What do you want to do with Microsoft from a compliance perspective, a security perspective, device management, Azure security, and cost management? If these are things that are on your radar for the next 12, 24, 36 months, you want to make sure you're working with a partner that understands these things and understands them well, right? They have real world examples of other clients that they've worked with, and we're very proficient in doing these things. That's the kind of partner you want to select. So make sure you vet that partner appropriately. Jason, you got anything you want to add? I saw some questions come in, so.
We did have one question just about educational, which I addressed there in the chat. But one thing that you brought up was, looking at the planning stage. I think that that's, one of the most important ones, even when you look at projects, is having a project manager in place to start that discovery phase. And a lot of it, even when it's looking at Azure, requires different assessments, migration assessments, things like that. How is your partner going to be involved with you on that next level of support for not only the planning and development, but also, giving you the best ROI when it comes to, are you getting, the outcome that's being expected? And that's really what we try to dive in further, is that if you're going down this path, does it make the most sense? And in some cases, maybe there's an alternative solution that we like to be more in depth on what you're looking at or what your expectations are, so that we can level set and provide you with the best support there.
Yes, sir. So definitely, take a snapshot of this slide, folks, and just make sure you sit down with your team and ask these questions and just see what kind of information comes out of that session. Very, very important. So now we're going to talk about the agreement qualifications. We're going to start doing some comparison between the two programs. As far as users are concerned, here's the real world information. Enterprise agreement, the minimum is 500 users. Now that's up from 250. So if you're an EA customer and you're on this call right now and you've got, say, 300 users, you would have been approached by Microsoft and they said, hey, we've changed our minimum to 500 users. You've only got 300. We're going to let you renew, but you only get one renewal cycle before you have to exit that enterprise agreement and consider some other program. Okay, so something to think about. If you're on an EA and it's a small number of users, you're going to have to make some changes soon, not right away, but after you knock out that one renewal cycle of the EA, you will have to make some business decisions there as it relates to your agreement. Microsoft 365 E5, this is something that as far as the EA community is concerned, a lot of Microsoft sales, everything like that. This is what they're going for, right? They want to get all customers to E5. So this is definitely another driver out there, and it would come up in a topic of conversation. Remember, the minimum is expected to change to 1,000, and that 2,400 seat threshold, which I'll dive into a little bit. Sit tight. That's the soft threshold as it relates to partner incentives and really what's driving partner behavior for selling these agreements. Anything over 1,200, 2,400, they're probably going to kind of get you to think about an EA. Anything below 2,400, they'll probably propose something related to a CSP agreement because that's really the let's call it the artificial dividing line that Microsoft has created right now amongst partners. Again, we're just being transparent with you. That way you know what to expect and how to best make a decision. CSP program, you just need one user and you need a tenant to get started. And this is all for seat-based licenses, perpetual license, and Azure subscription. Jason, anything?
Oh, you highlighted oh well, just what the CSP program offers.
Awesome. Now, when we get into the terms of the agreement, the EA is a 3-year contract. Okay, so 3-year commitment. If you don't like that level of risk, then there's a couple other programs you can consider. But you must go through what's called an LSP partner. There's a handful of them out there, not too many of them, but there has to be some kind of a contract made, through a large account reseller like an LSP. You do get to make changes on an annual basis. It's called a true up, and this is where you can, you have to report all license counts, all license additions, any changes that you made, any plan changes you made. All that stuff is done on an annual basis, and then renewals are software assurance only. So after that first 3 years, you've paid for the licenses that you now own, and you've got an SA only type EA moving forward, which really means you should look at the TCO, the total cost of ownership of an EA, over a 6-year period, because you want to weigh the costs, the heavy upfront costs that include licensing, along with the more lightweight costs on the back end of it through years 4, 5, and 6, because it's software assurance only. Okay. And when you're comparing that to other license programs like CSP, definitely weigh that. Remember, EA customers with less than 500 seats are only going to get one renewal cycle, and they'll have to transition to some other type of program. So be mindful of that if you're listening in on this meeting and you've got less than 500 seats on an existing EA. CSP program, depending on how you commit, it's either month to month or it's an annual commitment. You can make monthly payments on that annual commitment, right? So don't confuse month to month with annual commitment with monthly payments. They are two totally different animals in terms of flexibility and cost, but those are available. And you can also get perpetual and CSP licenses under the CSP program as well. Jason, anything to add?
It's always worth considering those cost factors, right? That's usually the driving factor. And looking at, enterprise agreements being paid up front versus CSP from a budgeting standpoint can really allow for more of that flexibility when it comes to how you're going to pay for it throughout that time frame.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about costs a little bit. That's our next slide. Way to tee that one up. So as far as the EA agreement is concerned, it is dependent on number of users and volume. And that's why we were asking earlier, make sure you know, are you level A, level B, level C? Like what type of an EA are you on? Because that'll definitely give you an understanding of how your costs are going to compare to some of these other programs. The pricing is locked for the term of the agreement. That's a good thing. Microsoft can't change any pricing on you for any licenses that you've provisioned on that enterprise agreement. Remember that 2,400 seat scenario that I was telling you guys about as far as how partners are incentivized. And remember, you're going to have to pay a support cost as an additional cost. And we'll get into that in just a second here. As far as CSP, there is that month-to-month program, does carry a 20% premium, but there's also an annual agreement that can carry more standard CSP costs, and you can make monthly payments on that or pay it all up front. It's not based on volume, at least not yet. But right now it's not based on volume. and the pricing is locked for the term of the agreement. And the partner does have some cost control. The CSP community, we get a tiny bit of margin to work with. It's not the end all be all, but the truth is our job is to position and sell professional services to you if we want to be an effective partner and actually, generate a profit. That's really where Microsoft wants the partner community to try and make their money. But Jason, I don't know if you have anything to add or if we can just move on here.
Yeah, I would really take into consideration the month to month with the 20% premium. In most cases, it really doesn't make sense to do that, and we try to provide guidance when it comes to that. Even though business may shift, and unless you're really expecting a 20% decrease in the staffing during that 12-month period, usually doesn't isn't really a viable solution in most cases.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, we don't really sell a lot of it. There's very few use cases where it can apply. It is something that is available, especially for those clients that are looking for something super flexible, but it does carry a cost, right? There's carry a cost associated with it for sure. Now, as far as support is concerned, definitely an item that comes up when we're doing EA and CSP comparisons, right? The enterprise agreement support, the agreement is sold in addition to the EA. And it's typically sold as a percentage, depending on the size of the enterprise agreement, anywhere from 2 to 10% of the revenue of the enterprise agreement. That determines your annual cost for support. It can also be sold as an annual fee called Premier Support, and that ranges, right? But again, it depends on the size of client, and this is also something that's set to be deprecated, right? They are changing their model as far as some support is concerned, and the support is with Microsoft Direct. End of story, right? That's who you reach out to. All support tickets go to Microsoft directly. So it's not dependent on the number of incidents or the value of the support experience. And this is something very important to think about. If you're paying $200,000 a year for support, $300,000 a year for support, and you're only reporting 20 incidents because you've got a very self-sufficient team or something like that, if you do the math, that's a very expensive per incident support cost. So one of the things we always try to evaluate under the CSP program is to look at like an advanced or customized or managed support services contract with the partner, right? Because it's more customized, it caters to your needs. The cost is based on projected number of incidents, and it's more dependent on your level of expertise in the organization. So it can definitely be substantially less in cost. Or you could just leverage the support that's included in the CSP program, which is tier 1 technical support. It's information, guidance, and they're available for you, and you can, as long as you're proficient enough to solve a lot of these issues on your own. But you want to consider support costs in your TCO against an enterprise agreement. So it's not just a license to license cost, right? There are other factors to consider, especially when it comes to support. Mr. Lane, anything to add, sir?
Yeah, as far as what MicroAge offers, I mean, we have the different advanced support options as well as having a retainer for hours of time being available when it comes to supporting Office 365 and even some of the on-premise solutions that we can offer support around.
Yeah, very true. As far as management, again, the enterprise agreement, LSP is your only partner, so you only get one, right? You can transfer LSP partners mid-flight. It's called a change of channel partner. It is something that you can do. So if you're on an EA with an existing partner right now and you're not all too thrilled, you want to keep your EA and move somewhere else, there is an option to transition to another EA partner. You do get backwards compatibility on your licenses. I believe it's 2 versions. And something to think about, folks, is that your EA can be blended with the CSP, right? You can have an enterprise agreement for these licenses over here, and you can still run a CSP agreement, with a partner for some of your other licenses, your seat-based licenses, et cetera. So you're not totally locked into an EA for the as far as the EA agreement itself is concerned, you're locked into a partner, but you do have the option to onboard another partner under a CSP agreement at the same time and have that run in tandem. No issues there at all. For CSP, you can't switch partners during the term of the agreement. You can have multiple CSP partners per tenant, as I stated. Sometimes there's a use case for that. Maybe you've got a specific Dynamics 365 partner that you like to work with. They provision the licenses to you. They give you all the support services around those Dynamics 365 licenses. Very common use case. We see it all the time. Um, can have an annual agreement blended with month to month. So, we were talking about the month to month thing with the 20% premium. You can have a handful of licenses floating around out there with that flexibility at 20%, and then have the rest of your licenses on an annual agreement, and you get backwards compatibility as well. But the thing is, and really where we see a lot of activity is that the CSP program can be blended with other agreements. So when you're looking at an exit strategy from an EA, or if you're just looking to have a less of an entanglement on an EA, you can blend it with like an open value agreement, an MPSA agreement, an EA agreement, right? There are options out there to sort of help you diversify those agreements into something that's a little more manageable for you, and something that is better for you, better for your business objectives, right? So we can talk about diversifying your agreements a little bit. Like I said, the EA can be blended with CSP. Okay. You can also do an EA with this. Like I said, you can do an EA with a CSP that can span multiple partners. You can do an EA with open license. Open license has been discontinued, but there are still customers out there that prior to December of last year bought a bunch of them and they've got them around. This is typically the result of license sprawl. So if you are an EA customer and you do have a bunch of open licenses floating around out there because somebody in some department didn't know you were on an EA and they just went and bought some licenses themselves. We do see this common, right? That's a very common thing. Consult with a partner that can sort of help you navigate how to get that stuff collapsed into something that's more manageable, more cost effective, right? We can talk that through with you. But you can split seat-based licensing with data center licensing. That's typically what we see. You keep your seat-based licensing on CSP, and then your data center licensing like Windows and SQL and even RDS cals, things like that. All of that can go to a more transactional type of agreement. And then pricing can align with EA level A and level B as far as CSP agreements are concerned, right? So definitely want to do some cost comparisons there. CSP with open value, that's the most ideal for an EA exit strategy. So if you're on an EA and you're thinking about getting out, most of the time the answer is CSP blended with an open value agreement, because you can transition that software assurance out of the EA into software assurance in the open value agreement. We don't need to get into too much detail with that today, but just know that that is a very common option because it's the most cost-effective way to get out of an enterprise agreement. It's something we know how to handle and quote. So if you want to look at that option with us, feel free to let us know. And then there's the MPSA agreement, but they are getting fewer, formerly known as the select agreement. Don't really see a whole lot of activity around select agreements right now. Customers are typically going to the CSP program as an answer for transactional license purchases. Jason, you care anything you care to add here, sir?
Yeah, the one thing that I would add is, the CSP with open value as being the most optimal solution in agreement with that. And sometimes just taking into consideration is, do you want to continue with the SA on these products? Is that something that is needed and at those quantities? And even just looking at the additional options that are available, whether it's just purchasing perpetual licenses, moving forward, or also in consideration that isn't listed here is Microsoft now offers subscription space for Windows Server, SQL Server, where you can essentially rent the license similar to Office 365 for a 1 or a 3-year subscription that is substantially less than even the perpetual license options.
That's a really good point. So what I think you were saying there is sometimes instead of renewing the SA on a lot of these licenses, don't do anything. Just let it expire, let it lapse. You still own the licenses perpetually. You just don't have to continue with that cost for SA. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely correct.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, some other items to consider here. We're moving at a really good pace. If you like software assurance, right? The Azure Hybrid benefit is something that has been historically underutilized, but we're starting to see more and more of it. But the truth is, if you have software assurance on data center licenses and SQL licenses, you can provision, right, workloads in Azure, leveraging that license with software assurance. That's why they call it a hybrid benefit. and you save significant money on those virtual machines and those workloads in Azure, right? Not offered in AWS, not offered in Google. This is an Azure only type thing. So if you've got software assurance and you're considering a journey to Azure, please make sure that you're mindful of leveraging that software assurance. This is a really, really powerful software assurance benefit to help you save money with provisioning all those workloads in Azure. There's funding programs available. Government education and nonprofit is available in EA and in CSP. To be determined on multi-geo licensing, but it will be available in CSP pretty soon here. It is available in Enterprise Agreement today, and now communication credits are available in the Azure subscription. Jason, did I miss one here? Is there anything else that they should be considering and thinking about?
On one of the points, so when it comes to communication credits, you look at communication credits as being a prepaid option that would draw against the credits needed. With the Azure subscription now, it's almost one of those where you're turning on overages. So it's after the fact, and it's just turning on those overages that now would go and invoice through the subscription rather than having to prepay the communication credits in advance.
Got it. Okay, so as far as action items for everybody out there, these are 5 pretty important bullets to think about. Understanding your current agreement renewal dates. So your EA, if you got an MPSA, if you got an open value, like any of those agreements out there, it's very, very hard to navigate this without a renewal date. So there are some larger clients out there that have multiple agreements, multiple programs, multiple renewal dates. And, it's important that you get with a partner like MicroAge who knows how to get a kind of a consolidated report of all that information, and then we can walk through that with you. And that's really sort of step one in helping you determine, a cost-effective way to get all of that stuff consolidated, right? Get you to a more manageable state for your licenses, and then your Microsoft milestones. What do you want to do with Microsoft products over the next 12, 24, 36 months? Having a roadmap for what you want to do with your business really, really, really helps us, the partner, and it helps you determine what you want to do from a licensing perspective today. Like Jason said at the very beginning of this call, we run into so many clients that are licensed for E5 and they're not using it, which means they've just been paying for it and paying for it and paying for it, and they haven't used it. They haven't done anything with it, right? So it's not a fun spot to be in. So we always try to propose a more cost-effective point of entry and then staging your way into something like that. That way, you're only absorbing the additional costs as you absolutely need it. And that really comes with the license optimization discussion, which is what I mentioned in the 3rd bullet point, but, understanding all the use cases for your user. Read between the lines with your partner. So I'm from the 80s, so that used to mean something different. But the read between the lines with your partner. Essentially, when you're talking to your existing partner, whether it's your EA partner, your existing CSP partner today, really try to understand of what their intentions are with you. Are they just trying to sell you something? Are they just trying to secure something, or are they really, interested in the value? And sometimes you're going to make a business decision that they don't like. We deal with enterprise agreements clients all the time. We don't always transition them to CSP because sometimes the answer is it's best to stay with an enterprise agreement, and we're okay with that. We're there to add value where we can and have a relationship with you. So sometimes it just doesn't go our way, and we're fine with that. But we definitely want to talk to you about it and understand what your intentions are. I think the final and most important one is to get your teams talking to each other about licensing. We do run into a lot of clients where they have like one person who's in charge of all the licensing for the business. And that person doesn't really interact with the other departments. Everybody's got their own objectives and business plans, but they're not really having the discussion collectively on what to do about licensing. And that's really where some magic can happen there. The end result of this type of collaboration is usually something more planned and more cost effective, right? So we definitely want to encourage you to, take your licensing information and share it with all the departments and see what happens. See what kind of discussions sprout from that. I don't know if any other questions came into the chat. Jason, did anything else come in? Would anybody like to throw a question into the chat that they would like to address right now?
So far, Rick, but I really think you nailed it. And considering the concept of the value, right? Make sure you're getting the value of what you're paying for, and if there is a comparison or a better option, taking into that for an alternative solution. We've run across in the last couple of years, even Office 365 E3 being chosen, and have you compare the advantages of business premium for less of a cost and now it's the case anyway, less of a cost. Before it used to be the same cost, but picking up those additional advantages of the enterprise mobility and security options that are available through business premium, and also enabling those features, endpoint manager utilizing Intune and autopilot, and creating more of that zero trust, utilizing Azure AD as your single source of authentication for user authentication when it comes to that, and setting up conditional access policies as well.
Yeah, Carl threw one question out there. Are there items that cannot transition to CSP from EA? Right now, that I'm aware of, it's multi-geo licensing. So if you're global, if you've got data center requirements for Office 365 in other countries, or GDPR is a requirement, multi-geo licenses is a requirement. This is set to come very, very soon to the CSP. I wouldn't be surprised if it was announced next fiscal, so sometime in July. But that I'm aware of, that's really it. There are some limitations around like Visual Studio, I believe, or Azure DevOps. Maybe Jason, you can speak to that a little bit, but we don't see a lot of activity around those concerns.
Yeah, most of those are included as far as like Azure subscription credits that might be incorporated as part of the EA. Microsoft has made it a lot easier now transitioning even Azure subscriptions if they're under an EA to a CSP partner. So we can help you along the way there as well. Whereas before you would actually need to create another subscription, move those resources. So Microsoft is even realizing, to have those partners with those expertise and being able to provide those additional services around Azure are imperative, in the next level of moving forward. Um, Power BI, Dynamics, just to mention to Carl there on the question there, there's different ways of licensing Power BI. We can definitely, I would say, follow up with your account executive. We'll get you more information there.
Interesting question that came in here. If you have a number of perpetual license traditionally for Project and Visio, do you recommend ditching the SA renewal for those products and transitioning to the subscription plans for those products? Well, you've got a couple options there. Now, I will tell you that typically when it comes to some of those products like Project and Visio, if you're licensed for software assurance, transitioning to CSP may not be the best option because of the costs associated, right? The cost delta between the two, because right now you're on SA only. But really the question, becomes, and Jason, I'm not sure if you want to add to this, is do all of your Project and Visio users need licenses? When we run a license optimization, check with a client, usually where we see a lot of gaps are things like Project Visio and Power BI. Jason mentioned Power BI. It's included with E5 or can also be purchased standalone. But if you own 100 of this and only 20 of those users are actually getting value out of it, then what's the point in continuing with those payments? So I think the short answer to your question is not always. It may make more sense to stay SA only under some kind of a program, whether you move it to open value or you keep it on your enterprise agreement. But I think more than anything is understanding, are those users that are licensed actually using it? Are they maximizing the value out of those products? And from that perspective, doesn't matter what program you move to, you reduce your counts and save some money there. Cool beans. Well, I appreciate all the questions. I think if anything, call to action would be, reach out to your MicroAge account executive and, set up some time with us. We're happy to talk with you. Microsoft's end of year is coming up here in June. It's going to be very busy around this stuff over the next couple of months here, but we're happy to talk to you and help you, sort of evaluate and make some of these decisions, whether it be staying with an EA or moving to CSP. or an open value agreement, let us help you make that decision. Happy to do it. Jason, any parting words?
Oh, I appreciate, time today, and I always look forward to discussing with you with further details and getting more information on where you're at and what outcomes you're looking for utilizing Microsoft, and a lot of that enablement that can be accomplished just by having the right licensing plans as well.
Cool. Well, Jason, I don't know how many of these we've done, but thanks again. Great working with you on this. And folks, we appreciate you joining us today, and we'll post a recording of this on our website.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care, guys. Appreciate it.